Hello, wanna see how I got my fur? Then listen to this dude.
Okay. Yeah. In this intermediate tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created the fur for this monster character from my latest BADMOTIONS animated music video and how you can do it too. We're going to see how to create and groom the fur in Blender, how to export it from Blender and import it into Unreal Engine, create a material for it, add physics to it and bind it to the monster so that it moves with it. After this video, you should have a solid overview on how to work with fur or hair for your characters in Unreal Engine. There are various ways to create hair or fur in Blender. I have chosen the geometry nodes and curve-based workflow. So here I am in Blender and you can see my monster character standing in the middle of the scene here. The quickest way to add fur to any character is to go Shift A, Curve, and Fur. This will just add fur to the whole character, but you lose a bit of control with that. It gives you already a bit of variation, noise and stuff, but I've chosen another way to do this. So I'm going to delete the fur, and if you don't know where to find it, in the Blender outliner, I can expand my mesh, and underneath you can see curves. So it's curves attached to the mesh. And with them selected, I can either do this here with right-click delete, or just press X, and then delete this object, right? So reselect in the mesh, I will go once again Shift A curve, and then empty hair, because this gives me more control over it. With this added and with the curves still selected, you can see anything, but that's fine. We were going to add this now. I'm going to go Control, Tab, and then go to Sculpt mode. Now I can sculpt the hair, but first I need to add some hair. On the top left here, I have some brushes, and the first brush I'm going to use is the Add brush, which allows me to paint on my mesh where I want fur to appear. On the top here, I have some settings, how many strands will be added once I brush here, and the curve shape. So the curve shape also gives me the length and the number of points that each strand curve will have. I'm going to leave this at default for now and just start painting. If you don't want double the work, you can also use symmetry. Like here, I'm going to press X symmetry, and once I paint something on the arm here, it's going to happen on the other arm as well. I can already see these strands are far too long, so I'm going to go Control Z, and under curve shape, I'm going to set it to maybe 0.1 or something like that. Let's try this again. And this is far better. You don't need to fill the whole body with fur now. These hairs, or these strands that we are setting, are only guide hairs. So they guide the rest of the hair that's going to be interpolated on top of it. So I'm just going to lightly place some hairs where I want to guide them, right? So just click, click, click. Because these guide hairs are also the hairs that I can then comb later on and bring into shape, how I want the hair to flow on top of my body. Alright, notice that I didn't put any hair on top of the head and also not in the face region, because this is where I don't want any hair, and on top I want longer hair. And to control this separately, I'm going to do this in 2 steps. Now I have added the guide hairs, and now I can comb them in the direction that I want the hair to be on the body. Right now it's just standing outside. To comb the hair now, to define how the hair flows on the body, I'm going to choose the comb brush here on the bottom left, and then I can just drag down on the hair and comb it in the direction. If it doesn't work as you expect it to do, in the top left here, you can see the settings for this brush as well. And there are 2 ways to interact with the hair in the space. Either it's a sphere shape, so your brush is essentially a sphere in the world, or you can project it and then it goes through the whole scene. And this is how I like to work mostly. So now I can just brush the hair a bit down in the direction that I want it to flow. Something like this. It can be a bit wild because the monster is not groomed very well, maybe, because it's a monster. So something like this could work. Now I can see all of these hair strands that I have added and combed so far are white. If I press Alt-A now, I can deselect all this hair and add new hair, which is going to be selected by default, and then I can only work with this hair and control it separate from the rest of it. You can also select and deselect it afterwards, but this is the way I like to work. So once again, I'm going to add, and for this curve shape, I'm going to set the length to maybe 0.25, because on the top of the head, I want it to be a bit longer. And then I'm going to add a few more guide hairs. Something like this. Once again, I'm going to comb it. Just a bit on top. Make it a bit wilder. Something like this. All right. Now we have added some hair, but it's still not full enough for the monster to really have fur, right? To do this and also add some variation and stuff, we can make use of modifiers. For that, I'm going to split my view. So I'm going to go on the top here, left click and drag, and create a separate view. Now I have the 3D view here, and on the top left here, I'm going to change this from the 3D viewport to the asset browser. Here I can see all my libraries, and if I select the hair category, I can see all of the hair modifiers that come with Blender. All of those are just geometry nodes. The cool thing is I can just drag and drop them on top of my hair, and they will be applied on it. The first thing I always do is use the set hair curve profile. So I'm going to drag and drop this on top of here, and in the modifiers category, going to the wrench icon here, I can see the surface deform, which the hair comes with, and here is the set hair curve profile. Here I can set up how the hair looks, how thick it is at the start, and how thin it gets to the end, right? The next thing is to fill the monster with more fur. And this I'm going to use the interpolate hair for. So once again, drag and drop. And now you see the hair disappears. Why does it disappear? Because the interpolate hair curves modifier needs an object to work. That's how the logic is set up. So I'm going to pick this here from the viewport, and now it gives me this. Now I can start with the settings down below. So here under density, I can change the setting. More density increases the number of hair strands. So let's say 25,000. You can see the monster is now full of fur. It looks a bit wild, but that's okay. Another thing we can notice is that the fur is also where the face is supposed to be, which is supposed to be empty. For this we can make use of a texture mask. I've already prepared one, but you can create a mask inside of Blender as well. So under mask texture in the interpolate hair curves, I'm going to go to open and just open my mask. And now you can see inside of where the face is, no fur is happening. And that's great. Okay, there's not enough fur happening here. So let's see. Oh, I didn't put in 25,000, it's 2,500. Let's add a 0, and now we can see the fur is filling the body much better. With this, we can see that the fur is very even, right? It's not very monster-like. So to get a bit more variation, I'm going to add the frizz hair curves here. So drag and drop on top. And now we can see that it's giving a bit of noise inside of the hair, which makes it look much more realistic. What I also like to use is the clump hair curves. This creates clumps of fur, right? Like you can see here. This makes it look very stylized, but we can adapt it. So for the clump hair curves, I'm going to set the factor down a bit. So just drag this a bit down so it's not as extreme. And then also I'm going to increase the tip spread. So how much the hairs will spread at the tip instead of just pointing to one point. So if I increase this a bit, you can see it's much more wild now. The clump offset also gives me a bit of variation, as you can see here. And under guide map, if I don't use existing guide map, it's also a bit more natural. So something like this could work. Feel free to play around with this, of course. With the frizz hair curves, you can also change the distance, so how far apart it gets pushed, and also the factor, so how extreme the effect is. For me, this works for now. To export the Groom from Blender and to be able to use it in Unreal Engine, we can make use of the Blender Groom export add-on. You can find this on Gumroad. I'm going to put the link down in the video description. After playing around with it a bit more, this is the result that I got so far. To export it now, we have to, of course, install and enable the add-on, and then press N to go into settings and choose the Groom section. So in the Groom exporter section, expand the curves, and here we can see all of the settings and data that we can export. Sometimes you get a warning like this: strands with less than 2 control points, they will not be exported, and blah blah blah. The easy way to fix this is to create your own geometry node solution. But trust me, it's really easy. So let's go in the modifier section, and at the end of this chain, I'm going to add a modifier, geometry nodes, and then just create a new one. Then on the top here, I'm going to go to geometry nodes, and in my new geometry nodes setup, I'm going to name this resample curve. And then here I'm just going to add one node, shift add, search, resample curves. just drop this in here. You can set the count to the highest number of points that you have set up with your curves, and then all of the curves are going to be resampled to these number of points. This is a quick and easy, maybe a quick and dirty fix, but it works. So back to layout, and once I go in the importer again, the warning is gone. Now I can set up the data that I want to export. I'm going to only export the UV and the width. The UV I can set up to be the surface UV coordinate. This gives the groom the information of the UV of the mesh underneath it, and then you can use textures for your fur material as well. Then the width I'm going to set to radius, and this sets up the data that we have set up in the hair curve profile settings. Right, with this setup, I can press on export and export it to wherever I want. This is going to be exported as an Alembic file, and then we can import it into Unreal Engine. Right, so here I am in the Unreal Editor, and you can see my naked monster standing there in an empty space, looking very glum. To give it some fur, we have to make sure that we enable the right plugins first. So under Edit, Plugins, we're going to search for Groom, and we need to have the Alembic Groom importer as well as the Groom plugin enabled. Then I can just drag and drop the Alembic file that we exported from Blender into my content drawer. Here under the Groom import options, you can see the root UV as well as the width have been imported. The settings you can leave on default mostly, and then just click on import. This now imports the data and creates a Groom asset for this. Double-clicking on the Groom asset opens up the Groom editor. Inside of the Groom editor, I have a big preview of my Groom, right? With a default material applied. So now my monster is blonde. On the right side, I have a big details panel with various sections here on top. One of these sections is the strands settings. And here I can set up the hair width. So if I didn't set up any correct hair width, or if it didn't get exported correctly, I can check the checkbox here and then override this, right? So now it's 0.01, which is far too thin, and you can adapt this here, right? Also, I can change the shape if I want to. So here the hair root scale is basically the start of a hair strand, and the hair tip scale is the end of a hair strand. So I can set this down to maybe 0.1, right? And now they get thinner at the top. But I'm going to leave this on default for now. The next section is cards. Here I can create hair cards from my Groom import, which is awesome. It will just create planes based on the shape of the Groom, and then also bake textures for you, which is a really great tool. Next, I'm going to create a very basic material for my fur. So I'm going to create a new material asset, m_monster fur, and open it up. With my material output selected, I have to make sure that the shading model is set to hair, and then I can just create a very simple setup here. So I'm going to press V, left click, to create a color or vector parameter, call this color, and set the default to red, because my monster is red. Then I can also set up the scatter. I'm going to create a parameter for that, as well as the roughness. Let me quickly create a material instance for that, so that we can better adapt this. mi monster fur, save it, and back in my Groom editor, I'm going to go to the material tab, add a material slot, and set my material here. Now we can see we have glowing red fur. Nice. And of course, we can just open up the instance, and if I now change the color, I can have any fur color that I want. Easy peasy, right? Quick tip, if you want to use a texture for your hair, so that not all of your hair has the same color, you can do this inside of the material. So you have to use the hair attributes, and from here we have the root UV, which we have exported from Blender. And then we can just add a texture, like this noise here for example, put the root UV into the UVs, and then the RGB into the base color. If I save this now and go back, you can see my monster now has rainbow colors. Because why not? And this you can also use for like stripes on a tiger or a cat, or like the dots on a leopard, whatever you want, right? That's cool. Let's move on to physics. So in the physics section in my Groom editor, I can enable deformation and enable simulation. If I click this both on, you can see that my hair starts moving. Let me quickly save this and show this in the level editor. So I'm going to drag and drop the Groom asset into the level editor. It just creates an actor for me. And now I can drag this around and you can see the fur reacting to the physics. Right now, this fur feels a bit too soft. I want it to be a bit harder and more resistant to the physics. So I'm going to go back into the Groom editor. And here we have some settings. And the settings I mostly only change are the bend damping and bend stiffness. So if I increase the damping, it will damp the movement a bit more. Let's say 0.015, and if I increase the bend stiffness, it will not bend as easily. So let's set this to, for example, 0.1 instead of 0.01, and if I now move this around, it's much harder, right? it doesn't move around as much. And this is more or less the look that I want. Cool. Now I have my fur ready to go, and I have my monster, which just waits for its fur coat. But I can't just do this, right? And hope for the best. I have to tell the monster and the fur how to work with each other. And for that, I have to create a so-called binding asset. So once again, in my content drawer, I'm going to right-click now on the groom asset and create a binding asset, which binds this groom to a specific skeletal mesh. Here in the groom binding options, I have to set the target skeletal mesh. I'm going to set it to be the monster. And then under source skeletal mesh, I'm also going to set it to the monster. Then I'm going to click on create, and this creates now the asset for me. This monster character here is already a blueprint that I have prepared. It's just a simple actor blueprint. Inside of that, I'm going to open up the blueprint editor. I can now add a groom component underneath my skeletal mesh. So I'm going to go on add, search for groom, and select groom here. Let's call this fur. And then under the groom asset, I want to use my groom asset that I have imported. Right, here it is. With this done, it already is attached to the monster, right? So if I now move the whole actor in my level, it will move with it. But it will not animate with it. So let me demonstrate this. If I select my monster skeletal mesh, use animation asset, and say dance, you can see the monster is dancing, but the fur is not dancing with it. So let's go back into the editor, and with the groom component still selected, in the details panel under binding asset, we have to also add the binding asset here, which now binds it to the skeletal mesh vertices. So now the groom works with it and moves with it. So if I simulate this, you can see the monster dancing here. Okay, you can see it moving. Okay, quick recap time. We have created and groomed the fur in Blender, making use of the geometry nodes curve-based workflow. We have added various modifiers to control the shape of the hair, as well as clumping and frizzing of the fur. Then we exported the hair from Blender and imported it into the Unreal editor. With the Groom editor in Unreal, we have a lot of control over the features and behavior of our fur. We can set up a material, we can set up how thick the hair is, and also if it uses physics and can be deformed. After setting everything up, we have added a binding asset to bind the fur to our skeletal mesh. Then it can move with the skeletal mesh even if it's animating. So you see, creating fur or hair for your characters can be really easy, and you have so much control over everything. You can use this for your games or for your animations. When using it in a real-time context like games, you should consider the performance impact of the hair. So you should see if you can get away with a lower strand count or make use of the haircuts. If you want to use it for your animations and render it out with the movie render queue, there are some pitfalls you have to avoid. Especially if you're using multiple camera cuts, because it could make your hair go all over the place in the render. There's a great guide on how to avoid this on the Epic Developer Portal, which I'm going to link in the video description down below. If you have any further questions, let me know in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Thanks for watching. See ya.